This simple insulin trick helps burn fat faster, backed by science. Why do so many people eat less and move more and still struggle to lose fat? Because calories are only part of the story. There's a hormone that calls the shots on whether your body stores or releases fat, and when you learn to work with it instead of against it, fat loss becomes simpler and more predictable. Think of insulin as the gatekeeper for energy. When insulin walks in, the body locks fuel away. When insulin steps back, that fuel can be released and burned. The trick I'm about to walk you through is not a fad diet or a magic pill. It's a focused approach that uses timing, food choices, sleep, and light movement to keep insulin in a range that favors fat release. And yes, it's backed by science, not by anecdotes, so I'll anchor this with two clear pieces of evidence before we get to the practical steps. If you want more science-based hacks like this, hit subscribe and stick around. Here's the science in 60 seconds. In laboratory experiments, isolated fat cells, adipocytes, behave like tiny storage tanks. Given nutrients, they inflate only when insulin is present. Remove insulin from the environment, and those same cells remain small, even if glucose and other fuels are abundant. That's a model system, not a human trial, but it's a vivid demonstration that insulin is a causal signal for storing fat. Clinical reality confirms the point from the opposite direction. People with type 1 diabetes who don't have enough insulin don't gain weight. Instead, their cells are starved even though blood glucose is high. Without insulin, glucose can't efficiently enter many tissues, and the body interprets that as a lack of usable energy. The result is weight loss, and, if untreated, dangerous metabolic breakdown like diabetic ketoacidosis. Those two lines of evidence, the lab model and the clinical observation, show that insulin isn't just correlated with fat storage, it's a key regulator. So what does insulin actually do? In plain language, insulin tells the body to store. It promotes lipogenesis, which is the creation and storage of fat, and it blocks lipolysis, the breakdown of stored fat for fuel. When insulin is elevated, the brakes are on fat burning. When insulin drops, the brakes release, and stored fat becomes available. That's the physiology behind the trick. Structure your day so insulin spends more time low or stable, and you give your body more opportunities to burn stored fat. One practical obstacle many people face is the dawn phenomenon. Early in the morning, a routine hormonal surge occurs. Cortisol, growth hormone, adrenaline, and glucagon rise to get you ready for the day. These hormones are intended to raise blood sugar and mobilize energy, but they also create a transient state of insulin resistance, meaning your body needs more insulin to handle the same sugar.
If you eat immediately upon waking, the combination of the dawn surge plus the incoming nutrients can demand an outsized insulin response, pushing your body back into storage mode. So the first piece of the trick is about timing your first meal to outlast the dawn surge. The simple insulin trick is 4 parts: timing of the first meal, sleep and stress optimization, food choices that stabilize blood sugar, and smart use of caffeine and movement. Use these together, they reinforce each other, and you'll shift the hormonal environment toward fat release more often. Start with timing. Delay your first meal by at least 2 hours after waking. If that feels like too much at first, try adding 30 minutes each day until you reach a comfortable 2-hour window. Another option is to adopt a time-restricted eating window. For example, eating only between noon and 6 p.m. or 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., depending on your schedule. The point isn't rigid fasting, it's about avoiding eating during the peak of that morning hormone surge, so your insulin response is lower with your first meal. For many people, this single adjustment reduces morning spikes and sets up a calmer metabolic day. Pause here for a quick reality check. Time-restricted eating is not for everyone. Pregnancy, history of eating disorders, certain medications, and specific medical conditions make fasting unsafe. If you take insulin or other glucose-lowering medicines, consult your clinician before changing meal timing. This trick can shift blood sugar and medication needs, so safety first. Second, prioritize sleep and manage stress. Poor sleep raises baseline cortisol and shifts your metabolism toward insulin resistance. Nights of interrupted sleep or insufficient total sleep make the dawn surge worse and increase cravings for quick carbs. Chronic stress does something similar. It keeps cortisol elevated, which elevates fasting glucose and makes your insulin responses larger. Good sleep hygiene, consistent bedtimes, dark, cool rooms, minimizing blue light before bed reduces those overnight hormonal disruptions. Simple stress practices like brief breathing exercises, a short walk, or a consistent wind-down routine work surprisingly well. Treat sleep and stress management as part of the metabolic strategy, not optional extras. Third, stabilize your blood sugar with the right food composition. When you do eat, prioritize fats and proteins as the base of the meal and use fiber-rich, non-starchy vegetables as your carbohydrate. Whole food, lower carbohydrate meals reduce rapid glucose spikes and blunt insulin surges. That does not require extreme carbohydrate elimination for everyone. It means choosing unprocessed carbs and balancing them with protein and fat to slow digestion. For many people, legumes can fit in, but monitor how they affect your individual blood sugar if you're tracking. Limit added sugars, refined starches, and processed foods that cause quick spikes.
Think of meals that keep energy steady for 3 to 5 hours, rather than peaking and crashing. To give you orientation, not prescription, a general benchmark many clinicians use is a fasting blood glucose around 85 milligrams per deciliter and returning to under roughly 105 milligrams per deciliter a couple hours after eating for many people without diabetes. These numbers are illustrative, and individual responses vary widely. Don't take them as medical targets if you have diabetes or take glucose-lowering medications. Instead, use them as a way to think about whether your meals keep things steady or cause big swings. Fourth, be strategic about caffeine and movement. Caffeine amplifies the early stress response for some people, increasing blood glucose and making the initial insulin requirement higher. If you suspect you're insulin resistant, consider delaying significant caffeine until about 90 minutes after waking or after a light walk. That simple delay often cuts the combined effect of caffeine plus the dawn surge. Movement before eating, even just 10 to 20 minutes of brisk walking, uses some of that mobilized energy and reduces the body's need to store incoming calories. Gentle activity in the morning, a walk, a short body weight circuit, or even cleaning the house briskly can be surprisingly effective at turning an insulin-prone morning into a fat-burning one. Put these 4 parts together and you have a concrete day plan that exemplifies the trick. Imagine waking at 7 a.m. You wait about 90 to 120 minutes before your first substantial meal. Rather than making a sugary breakfast, you step outside for a 15 to 30-minute walk and make coffee after you return, or wait 90 minutes for the coffee if you're especially sensitive. At about 9 a.m., you have a meal centered on eggs or a plant-based protein, avocado or olive oil for fat, and a generous serving of leafy greens and non-starchy vegetables. Lunch is similar in composition and timed within a 6 to 8 hour eating window if you're doing a time-restricted pattern. You take care to finish the last large meal 3 to 4 hours before bed, so the overnight period is mostly fasting time. You aim for 7 to 9 hours of sleep with a consistent schedule. These are not hard rules, but templates. Adapt them to your lifestyle, medical needs, and preferences. Here's what to expect when you do this consistently. With fewer large insulin spikes, your body spends more time in a state where stored fat is accessible. You may notice reduced mid-morning hunger, fewer cravings for sweets, more stable energy, and gradual shifts in weight and body composition over weeks. This approach is not a crash diet.
It's a way to reduce the hormonal push towards storage and give your physiology more opportunities to burn fat. Results vary. Some people respond quickly, others more slowly, and genetics, baseline insulin sensitivity, and activity levels all matter. Let's address common questions. Does this mean calories don't matter? No.
Energy balance is still relevant for long-term weight change, but insulin modifies where calories go, into or out of storage, and that matters for how your body partitions fuel. The trick here is to use timing and composition to reduce the hormonal signal that favors storage, making the calories you consume more likely to be used or burned rather than immediately stored. Is intermittent fasting required? Not necessarily. You can use the timing principle without strict fasting. The key is avoiding eating right into the dawn surge and reducing frequent eat-snacking patterns that keep insulin elevated. For many people, a modest fasting window or delaying breakfast is the simplest, most sustainable change. What about exercise? Strength training and regular aerobic movement help improve insulin sensitivity over time and complement this strategy. The novelty here is emphasizing light movement before the first meal to take advantage of hormonal conditions in the morning. More intense workouts can be scheduled as fits your routine, but gentle pre-meal movement is a low-barrier habit that delivers immediate benefits for many. Now, the important safety notes. If you have type 1 diabetes, do not change your insulin regimen without direct guidance from your healthcare team. The clinical example we used earlier, where absence of insulin causes cellular starvation despite high blood glucose, is a stark reminder that insulin is life-saving for people with type 1 diabetes, not a variable to be reduced on a whim. People on insulin for type 2 diabetes or on other glucose-lowering medications should also consult their clinician before experimenting with changes in meal timing or composition, because medication needs can shift. Likewise, time-restricted eating or prolonged fasting is not appropriate for those who are pregnant, individuals recovering from or living with an eating disorder, and people on certain medications. If unsure, check with a provider. There are practical rules of thumb that make this easier. Avoid heavy late-night meals within 3 to 4 hours of sleep. Prefer whole foods over processed snacks. Build meals around a protein source and healthy fats with vegetables for volume and fiber. If you drink coffee, notice whether it spikes your anxiety or your blood sugar. If it does, try delaying it or adding a protein-rich snack first. If you monitor glucose, use your readings as feedback rather than as strict rules. Look for patterns and adjust timing and composition before changing medication. You will also hear people promise rapid, dramatic results from timing tricks alone. Be skeptical. This method helps by changing hormone exposure, but lifestyle change, consistent movement, and long-term dietary quality all play roles. Think of the insulin trick as a multiplier. It makes other efforts more effective. It's the difference between trying to empty a bathtub while the faucet is wide open and turning off the tap first. If you want one simple starting experiment, for 2 weeks, delay your breakfast by 2 hours and replace a carbohydrate-heavy breakfast with a plate of protein, fat, and non-starchy vegetables for your first meal. Keep your last meal at least 3 hours before bed and add a brief walk before breakfast. Track how you feel, your hunger, and any weight or body composition signals over those 2 weeks. If you take diabetes medications, do this only under medical advice. Many people notice less snacking, steadier energy, and gradual fat loss within a few weeks when combined with regular movement.
To summarize, and to bring it back to the title, this simple insulin trick helps burn fat faster, backed by science, because it reduces unnecessary insulin spikes, uses the dawn phenomenon to your advantage instead of working against it, stabilizes blood sugar through smart food choices, protects your metabolic baseline with sleep and stress management, and uses caffeine and movement strategically. The lab evidence with adipocytes and the clinical observations in type 1 diabetes are not the whole story, but together they explain why insulin is a primary lever to pull when you want to shift the body from storage mode to fat-burning mode. One final caveat: individuals vary. Some will respond quickly, others slowly. This is a safe, low-cost, practical strategy for many, but it must be individualized when medical conditions or medications are involved. If you have diabetes or any condition that affects blood glucose, check in with your healthcare provider before making changes. If this helped, subscribe for more science-based strategies and check out my next video on meal timing and metabolism, where I go deeper into sample meal plans, troubleshooting for common issues like morning cravings, and how to track progress safely. Try the trick responsibly, pay attention to how your body responds, and report back with what you notice. The small timing shifts add up.